When I stepped into the hall, their scents cut like knives. No one expects the dead to come back and demand a seat at the table. Stone and timber held the room together, the way old vows held a pack. Tight, imperfect, and creaking, when too many hearts beat at once. Light fell cold from the ceiling, sharpening the edges of faces around the round council table. Authority had a smell here. Resin from the pine beams, the metallic whisper of old blood rubbed into the grain, the restrained bite of wolfsbane oil kept for tradition and not for use. Rings scraped as elders adjusted their hands on the polished wood. A few younger wolves shifted in their chairs, boots dragging. They'd been taught to look unbothered. They'd been taught to keep their throats down and their chins up. None of that training accounted for me. I let the door sigh closed behind me. Once, the threshold had known me. In that superstitious way, wood remembers who passes through it most. Home used to open for me with a breath. Today, it swallowed, and then coughed me into the circle. Trace, someone breathed, the name breaking like frost underfoot. Prizrak, another whispered. Ghost, not a ghost. Too much heat in my veins for that. Too much ache in the scar that curled under my sleeve when I lifted my hand and showed the slim leather case. Papers. Rights. The silent language of power in a room that pretended it was ruled by teeth. I walked to the table at an ordinary pace, because to rush would be, to admit hunger, and to dawdle would be to pretend I didn't care. The line between those is where I'd lived for 10 years. At the head of the circle sat the alpha. Roen Hale wore restraint, as if it were a well-tailored suit, dark hair barber neat, jaw outlined as if a sculptor had been mean with his chisel, eyes slate and steady. The silver alphas's token hung at his throat, and his scent braided the air. Pine and winter, the edge of a storm that hadn't decided if it would break. He didn't stand. Points for discipline, or points for not trusting his legs. I set the leather case on the table, undid the clasp, and slid the documents out so the elders could see the embossed seals. My wrist turned, cloth pulled back, the brand flashed. Gasps skittered through the hall. Some were theatrical, some were reflex. The marks' lines were clean and foreign, a lattice burned in by another house, another set of laws. It lay over the old bite scars like a new script written on a palimpsest, as if my skin were a page no one could stop editing. That brand, Elder Callan said, voice measuring, makes you another pack's property. I didn't look at him. It makes me someone who survived, I said. And it makes this, I tapped the top document, binding, by your own charter, Section 3, Article 5. The advisor's seat remains with the last claimant unless death is proved by body or formal witness. You recorded my death without either. Silence pinwheeled, clipped by a younger wolf's throat click. He'd only just learned how to swallow his questions. Our witness was the fire, another elder murmured. Eyes slid toward Roen. I glanced at him then. He hadn't blinked. He had blinked. I knew he had in the last 5 minutes, but now he wasn't. He was doing that thing with stillness that alphas learn, a quiet like loaded stone. We can debate our paperwork after, I said. But debate it we will. The brand buzzed faint against my skin, a mosquito trapped under glass, more aware than painful. It always did this around him, around home, like it recognized something it had been told to forget. I put my palm flat to the table, to the same place I had placed it 100 times before I died, and met Rowan's eyes. You crossed my name out, I said. No volume, no heat, just the truth laid on the wood between us. The smallest change moved through him, and almost laughter in his breath, not humor, recognition of the blade on the table, and the nick at his own throat. You're not a line, Trace, Roen said. You're a knife in the back. A murmur rippled. It wasn't outrage. It was relief. Banter, even bitter, meant we were still speaking a language the room understood. That would assume you turned on me, I said mildly. Let's not give the children bad metaphors. I reached for the pen clipped to the case. The same brand of black fountain pen Roen preferred, the nib scratched in the same way. That was almost funny. Survival turns you into a collector of markers. Anything that tells you the world still hooks into itself the way it used to. Trace Harvey, I announced, pen poised. as if I could sign the past the way I signed a ledger, returning to claim the advisor's seat as per charter. That's the seat with a view of the exit, if I recall. A few quiet laughs then, the brittle kind that keeps people from biting their lips in front of an alpha. Rowan's voice slid into the small warmth. We're not required to humor you. No, I said. You're required to follow the law you bled to write. He flinched, barely. If I hadn't spent years mapping the micro-shifts in predators' bodies just before they pounced, I might have missed it. He was remembering something. Ink and blood and signatures over graves. An elder cleared her throat. We should review, she said carefully. It has been a decade. Yes, I said. I swallowed the decade with her. Its edges branded the inside of my throat on the way down. It has. Rowan leaned back. His fingers made a temple out of themselves, thumbs touching his lower lip. Let him read the charter, he said. Let him claim what can be claimed. His gaze didn't leave mine. We aren't a pack of thieves. Not thieves, then. Just a pack that had learned to live with locked doors. The documents moved clockwise. Seals glinted. Eyes tracked. The brand hummed like a low chord under the table's surface, vibrating through bone. What happened to you? Someone blurted finally. I turned my head. The young wolf with the swallow click. He had freckles like spilled cinnamon, and his scent rode high with fear and curiosity. He reminded me of boys from long ago, always craning toward the edge of a cliff to see if falling felt like flying at first. I died, I said, and then I got better. A few snorts. One bark of humor that someone smothered into their sleeve. My eyes returned to the alpha at the far side of the circle. Roan was a quiet jeopardy, more dangerous for how contained he kept it. He didn't ask me what I meant. He didn't shift in his chair. He didn't pretend he didn't care, which is its own kind of lie. He simply watched, and I felt the old map in my blood light up. The way to him, the way through him, the way around him. Once, the smell of rain on him had meant home. Summers steeped in green, my shoulder under his jaw as we counted breaths. On the porch, and pretended leadership was a future, and not a weight. The rain smell was still there, threaded with iron the years had added. I wanted, against all of my new edges, to put my face there and test if the storm would break. Trace Harvey, Elder Callan read, as if my name were a spell he could mispronounce. Into nothingness. Recognized advisor, seat to the alpha with rights of counsel. He swallowed. No formal witness to death was recorded. The body was never recovered, I supplied. Surprising what happens when you don't look. That earned me a look from Rowan. We both remembered the fire. We both remembered the moment where he'd chosen, what, smoke or sun? Duty or me? Perhaps I'd invented that moment after the fact. Trauma is an excellent editor. It cuts until a story makes the shape it wants. The last seal thunked soft against the table as Callan set the pages down. He looked like he'd bitten into something tart. By charter, he conceded. The seat is open to your claim. Good, I said, and put the pen to the line. The nib scratched. My hand was steady. It had learned steadiness in places where shaking got you killed. The signature bled, black into cream, a river finding its bed. The room breathed out. That was the thing about paper. Once it holds your name, the rest of the world has to hold it. 2. Or admit it doesn't believe in paper, which is more radical than most packs can afford. Sit, Rowan said. I looked at the chair. The same old carved oak, sanded down at the arms where my thumbs used to rub during long debates. Little ghosts of me everywhere, worn into objects. I left the chair empty a heartbeat longer than polite, because the thing about ghosts is they get to be inconvenient. Then I sat. The chair didn't welcome me. It tolerated me. That was fine. Tolerance is where peace begins when love is not yet brave enough to come back. Proceed, Rowan told the council. They tried. They really did. Voices found their lanes. Reports lined up. Numbers were recited. Borders were described as quiet or restless. The pack had grown leaner and more precise under Rowan. He'd become the kind of leader who sharpened people, and some of them gleamed now in ways they wouldn't have under the old regime. Pride tugged meanly at my chest and pretended it was resentment. 5 minutes in, 3 wolves had forgotten to breathe right. 10 minutes in, 2 had adjusted their seats to hide the way their bodies kept, triangulating to me and to Roen, as if we were magnetic poles warping a compass. This wasn't how it was supposed to be, my skin told me. My skin also told me it didn't care about supposed. Enough, Roen said at last, not loudly. The words settled like a lid on a pot just before it boils over. We'll adjourn, he added. Half-day recess. We'll reconvene with a motion to formalize Mr. Harvey's return to post. He didn't glance at me for the cue. He just said it, like it had already been decided. That's how you move a pack. You speak as if the world has already tilted, and everyone decides it's easier to let gravity do the rest. Chairs scraped. Papers vanished into folders. No one looked at me, and everyone looked at me. They stole glances like pastries, like they weren't supposed to be sweet. When the hall cleared, I stayed in my seat. There are rituals to power that don't get written anywhere. One of them is, the person who doesn't scramble to leave isn't worried about being cornered. The last of the young wolves shut the door. The sound came heavy, like a heart slamming into the cage of a rib. I exhaled. He didn't move at first. Then his hand lifted, and he loosened the top button under the Alpha's token. An ordinary gesture transmuted by the room's emptiness into something indecently personal. For a breath, the weight of the years hung between us like a suspended bridge. Every plank rotten, every rope frayed, and yet still connecting 2 cliffs. I stood up. The chair's legs murmured against stone. My brand hummed again, small and rude. I pressed a thumb to it, the way you press a thumb to a bruise, to prove you can. You crossed me out, I said again, because repetition is how you learn, and sometimes it's how you teach. Rowan's gaze didn't waver. You're not a line, he repeated. You're a knife in the back. Knives are honest, I said. They cut where you put them. His mouth tilted, not into a smile, into the thought that one might be possible someday if the world didn't end first. And where would you put me, Trace? I looked at him the way you look at a storm coming in, the way that says you've learned the language of thunder. My pulse snagged on his scent and on the old door frames of memory. It wasn't longing. Longing is soft. This was harder. This was the knowledge that the only home that ever fit me had taught itself to live without me. Somewhere I can see you, I said, so I don't get surprised again. The quiet thickened until it felt like dark honey. Everything in me ached to say the thing that would shatter us or save us. I didn't. I had learned new religions in the last 10 years, chief among them, patience. Between us, the table shone, slick as a river. The hall was empty. The air had the taste of iron. The silence between us was thicker than blood. Rowan's office had always felt like a spine. Dark wood for bone, panes, of glass for ribs, the world on the other side breathing in and out. The map of our territory covered the far wall, inked borders like healed cuts, pins like teeth. The room smelled the way memory does when you unwrap it after too long. Pine shavings, paper, and rain held in metal, the hint of a storm that promised discipline instead of chaos. He closed the door behind us. The latch clicked with the clean final sound of a trigger settling. You redecorated, I said. I edited, he replied. The pack needed fewer trophies and more tools. That's one word for it. I moved without hurry. Noting changes the way your tongue finds a cracked tooth. The old clock had been replaced with a simple brass-faced thing that told time without sighing. The bookshelf had been purged of the sentimental histories our predecessors used to pretend we were destined. A low cabinet had a new lock. On the desk, a paperweight I knew too well, smooth river stone, cold and heavy, sat on a stack of reports. My thumb had polished that stone's edge years ago, absent-mindedly, during arguments that felt like rehearsal for the lives we never got to live. I touched its cool curve. The brand under my sleeve woke. No pain yet, just a low, meddling hum, as if the burned lattice remembered the frequency of his presence and couldn't decide whether to vibrate toward it or away. Rowan took his seat behind the desk but didn't lean back. The alpha token at his throat glinted. He'd loosened the collar just enough to breathe. His hands were still, too still. He could quiet himself like that. A hunter's trick, masquerading as professionalism. Say it, he said. You could have looked, I said. I could have buried, he answered. It's almost the same. The map on the wall ticked. Or maybe that was my pulse climbing a rung. You taught me the difference, I said. Looking is an act. Burying is an alibi. His gaze flickered. One of those micro-motions I'd learned to catalog before I died. He had always hated when I put words on the blood things. It made him feel too seen, like a creature with teeth being asked to explain how he chewed. I taught you to protect the living, he said. And I did. 10 years of it. The brand brightened, prickling now, each line a thin wire strung tight. This was how it behaved when the air sharpened. Recognition dressed as warning. The scent in the office changed subtly too. The pine deepened, the paper's chalk went dry, and his rain note grew closer, like a front rolling over the mountains. The map pulled at my eyes. Territory had become smaller, but denser. We had given up romantic borders, the ones that looked good on feasts, and became bleeding liabilities in lean seasons, and carved out something defensible. That was Roen all over, less gold leaf, more steel. You did protect them, I said. You just forgot I was one of them. His jaw flexed. No, he said softly. I never forgot. The desk's surface reflected us both, warped by wood grain and the slight waviness of old glass set into the top. Two shadows, with too much shared history to be elegant. How many nights, I asked, did you stand in this room and decide the way forward by imagining the way I would have argued? How many nights, he returned, did you survive by imagining I had sold you out? We were closing distance, but not with bodies. With the questions that strip you to tendon. Touching the old pen was a bit theatrical, he added, nodding at the fountain pen by my hand. I twirled it. You always liked the performance of civility. I like when the hours between hunts are quiet. They haven't been quiet, I said. Not with the letters you filed. Do you want me to pretend we didn't need to file them? His tone didn't rise. He could keep it on the low shelf and still make you feel like you were reaching up and failing to grasp. That we didn't have death tallies to confirm and new wolves to train and borders to trim until they fit. You could have looked, I said again, because sometimes you hand a man the same blade twice to see if he'll cut a different place. He exhaled, and for a beat I smelled the edges of him, a flicker of want, a pulse of grief, even through the practiced control. Wolves leak at the seams, whether they intend to or not. The rain note was darker now, carrying copper, and under it, very faint, the ghost of a porch in summer, an old habit of breath. Do you think I didn't? He asked. My hand closed around the paperweight without permission. The stone was colder than it had any right to be. Your reports say you didn't, I said. My reports say the pack could survive without me believing in miracles. The lattice burned a little sharper. The hum tried on pain, then put it back, like a coat too hot for the room. An odd calm came over me. A steadiness learned in places where a tremor gives the game away. I set the paperweight down and walked the perimeter of the office, skirting the map, fingers passing over the frames of glass. My fingerprints would fog, then fade. Proof, then memory. The brand thrummed at each window like it recognized escape. I know what you smell like when you're lying, I said. You smell like sawdust and math. That earned me the ghost of a smile. And when I'm telling the truth, like rain, I said, without moving my eyes from the old river cut that marked our eastern border. Like rain deciding whether to bless or ruin. Trace, just my name. It stroked the brand the wrong way and right at once. My throat went tight. I planted a hand on the windowsill and the other on the desk, kneading wood. Under my palms, the old bones of the house to remind me I had one too. I don't want your regret, I said. I don't want your explanation. What do you want? I looked at him. The alpha token threw a thin blade of light across his collarbone. He was the kind of beautiful that made you angry at the world for wasting it on leadership. I want my seat, I said, and I want you to stop acting like the only way to save something is to kill the part of it that feels. His eyes cooled. Feeling gets wolves dead. Feeling gets wolves found, I said. Silence opened, a clean vertical cut straight through the center of the room. Somewhere in the building, a door slammed. sending a faint shiver through the floorboards like a body remembering a fall. The brand flared. It was faster this time, heat spinning out along the burned lines, a pulse that wasn't mine syncing with my own. The back of my neck prickled. My breath hitched into a growl. I swallowed too late. Rowan's chair scraped. He was on his feet in a single, unbroken line of motion. Trace, I'm fine. It came out not fine. He circled the desk, but didn't crowd me. Smart. He set his hands on the wood, palms down, leaving space like a bridge to cross if I chose it. The alpha scent rolled over me, controlled, precise, not a dominance play so much as a reminder of his steadiness. For a moment the room tilted, and I hated the way relief tried to share a bed with fury in my chest. What did they do to you? He asked, softer than I had heard him speak since the hall. They tried to make me forget, I said. Turns out, I'm not suited to amnesia. The hum downtuned, not gone, the way a struck chord hangs in the air even after you lift your hands from the keys. I pulled my sleeve back without thinking. The brand looked like a language that wanted to be read backward, neat geometry, faintly raised, the color of old iron. He watched it the way you watch a fuse, careful, unwilling to look away. It reacts to you, I said. And to this house, some days it's worse, some days I barely notice. Today isn't one of those days. No, I said. Today isn't. His mouth did that almost smile again. Dying at birth. I could have looked, he said quietly, as if answering himself this time. I did look. Just not well enough to find you without burning more lives to the ground. You chose them over me, I said. I chose them because of you. I wanted to throw the paperweight through the glass. I wanted to pull him by that stupid token and find out if rainwater tasted like I remembered. Both wants were violent. Both were mine. The desk took the brunt of what I chose instead. My palm hit first, flat, hard, then my fingers curled and my nails bit. The old glass groaned. Wood yielded. Claws slid a breath and caught, carving 4 clean lines into the lip of the desk, like a signature no charter could contest. The sound was indecently satisfying. It also surprised him, which was petty and pleasing. We stared at the marks. My pulse thudded. The brand throbbed with an echo that was not pain and not pleasure, something animal and older than both. Rowan huffed a breath that might, almost, have been a laugh. I see your claws haven't rusted. I let the anger cool in my bones like quenched metal. Being alive means you get to practice that. I practiced them on worse than you, I said, and let him hear the truth in it. He nodded. The smallest concession a king can make to a returning ghost. I'm listening, Trace, he said. Say what you came here to say. I took my hand off the desk and held it up. 4 thin lines of wood dust striped my fingertips. I blew, and the dust lifted, catching light like snow. I came to say I'm back, I said. Not as a memory, not as a problem to be managed, as counsel, as a blade where you need one, and as a man who will not be buried again, not by enemies and not by you. Something eased in his shoulders, not surrender. A reconfiguration. Then sit, he said, and help me make sure what we've held for 10 years doesn't crack because it remembered how to feel. I slid into the chair opposite his, the one with the old dent where my shoulder always settled wrong. The brand went quiet enough to pass for peace. On the wall, the borders did not move, but for the first time since I stepped into that hall, I believed they could. The night the pack burned has edges I can pick up without cutting myself, if I'm careful. Memory is a kind of blade, yes, but it's also a hook. You can pull yourself back with it if you know where to grab. The forest was a mouth, all flame and breath. Pine sap boiled in the trunks and burst with sharp little screams. Smoke went low and mean, wrapping ankles, crawling into lungs. Everything smelled like iron and pitch, and the clean, high panic of wolves, trying not to sound like prey. Trace! Someone shouted behind me. Hold, I barked, because that was the right word then. Form. But the line had broken, and I wasn't a miracle. I was a body with rules, and the first rule was, when the littlest ones run, you do not run farther than they can follow. I found the pup under a fallen limb, white toes, big eyes, not yet grown into their own fear. He tried to be brave. He failed in the exact way that makes you love something, utterly. "Hey," I told him, voice pitched to coaxing, to steady. My own lungs were filing complaints with smoke. "You're going to put your paws where I put mine, you hear me?" He nodded too hard. The branch pinned his hindquarters. Heat rained sparks around us from the canopy. The trace, the old bond that lived like a faint silver thread through the meat of me, tightened, warning and memory both. Somewhere on the far side of the blaze, an alpha's scent pressed against the wind, and the world wanted to bow. "Roen." A command rose in me unbidden. Not even his voice yet, just the shape of it. "Move." "I've got you," I told the pup, because truth matters even when it's aspirational. I wedged my shoulder under the branch, lifted, felt something go bright along my spine. He wriggled free and clung to my shirt with small, frantic claws. "Where's your mother?" He swallowed air. "Gone. Not if I can help it," I lied. And then I ran. We moved bent and low through a corridor of half-burning ferns. Toward the creek I could hear gurgling like a drunk under a bridge. A shadow lunged out of the smoke, teeth where a face should have been, the wrong scent under a coat that looked like ours. He wasn't one of us. He smelled borrowed, like he'd bathed in our pine to hide rot underneath. I didn't think. I learned to stop admiring how noble that sounded. I broke his knee first, because knees win fights faster than throats when you're carrying something. He went down howling. I didn't watch him finish. "Left," I told the kid. "Left, left. Good, you're left." We hit the creek bed with a skid of wet stones. Water slicked smoke off the insides of my mouth. It smelled like old coins and cold. Across the creek and up the bank, the clearing opened like a wound, ring of blackened stumps, our signal pyre in the center throwing light that didn't feel like help. Wolves moved in the edges of it, our wolves and not ours, all a mess of teeth and choices. The trace sang harder, pushing against bone. I followed it, like you follow a string, through a labyrinth. And there he was. Roen stood at the pyre's rim, jacket off, shirt torn at the shoulder. Blood running down his forearm in a line that decided not to clot. His face had that iron stillness he uses when he wants other bodies to remember what they are for. His mouth shaped sound. My blood translated it faster than my ears. "Retreat," he called. Not fear, not surrender. Geometry. Get them out. West draw, then split and fold south. "Go." We locked eyes for a beat too long for the battlefield, and exactly long enough for the life we had. The left corner of his mouth twitched, as if he were going to say my name and decided better. I put the pup down and pushed him toward the west. He went 3 steps. A detonation punched the clearing like a god's fist. The pyre leaped, wood splitting, the air becoming wall. I saw light. I saw Rowan's arm sweep, directing bodies through the gap. I saw teeth that weren't ours flash in the blown open dark. And then, the world flipped. Fire picked me up by the chest and taught me about flight. The ground left. So did sound. The trace snapped taut, and then twanged like a struck wire, spilling a sensation I didn't have words for then. Disbelief, command, a taste of rain. My head hit something thoughtful and hard. A ring of sparks turned the color of old brass. The pup's scream threaded the hot silence, and then cut out. Darkness is not nothing. It's crowded with the things you hope are not there. I dropped into it, like a stone into a well. I woke in a rectangle too small for honor. The air had a stale fur smell, drying blood and colloidal silver, the cheap kind, overused, underfiltered. Bars, straw gone dusty, a shallow basin of water cloudy enough to count as a threat. My body made its list of parts, fingers, toes, ribs too protesting, a welt along my hairline, and a brand new ache that sat under the left collarbone like a swallowed ember. The trace had crawled into a corner of me and curled up tight, not broken, not exactly asleep. When I breathed, it twitched like a dog dreaming. "Well," said a voice beyond the bars. "The dead man stands." I sat, slower than pride, and put my back to the wall. The room was lit badly, too much shadow for a cell, but I could make out the shape of my jailer. Not a big man, a careful one, smelled of tannin and anxiety, and the wrong mint, the kind they use to hide meat gone off. If you're going to kill me, I said, voice raw with smoke and thirst, you've missed the poetic window. He snorted. Poetry is for wolves who think they invented death. He crouched, elbows on knees. You're not in our ledger under kill today. You're under options. I smiled with as much tooth as the bars allowed. You say that like it's good news. It's the news you get. He tilted his head. There was a star-shaped scar by his ear. An old puncture healed lazy. You want to live? I'm an omega, I said. We're notoriously inconvenient that way. His mouth did a quick mean grin. Then you'll listen. He put 2 fingers through the bars, not close enough for me to grab, close enough for me to smell the cheap mint again. If you want to live, forget who you were. I don't do amnesia on command. You'll do it to eat, he said. You'll do it to sleep enough not to wake screaming every time a door opens. You'll do it because the alpha who didn't come for you will not come. He said it like a promise and like a dare. You'll do it because when wolves talk about love, they forget to count. He stood, as if he'd given me a kindness. He didn't have the scent of a man used to mercy. What do you want? I asked. He shrugged toward the left, where I could now see a bench and a narrow table with tools on it. Clean, indifferent steel. A body that knows how to behave, he said. A name we can file without making the neighbors notice. And quiet. You kidnapped a wrong choir boy, I said. Then sing to yourself, he said, and went away. I sat very still and counted my breaths until the trace unwound a fraction. It hated the silver. It hated the walls. It hated that my skin already learned the shape of a cage. When the first wave of shaking came, I pressed my palms into my thighs and rode it like weather. Time does tricks in a cell. It stretches until even cruelty gets bored. They fed me enough to keep the machine running. They gave me water and took it away as if teaching me to pray. Once, in a fever, I tasted rain and woke with the word retreat in my teeth like a bone. On the 4th day, or the 15th, the numbers refused to join a pack. They brought heat and needles and ink that smelled like pennies and iodine. They burned the lattice into my skin with efficient attention, speaking laws in a language older than I knew. The trace fought and then adapted. It's arrogant that way. It took the lines and filed them under survive. When it was done, the brand looked like a story I wouldn't have chosen, printed in a font that didn't know my name. You're ours, someone said. I'm mine, I said through chattering teeth, because defiance is cheap and sometimes you need something inexpensive to hold. You can rent. They laughed. Later I learned who to appease and who to ignore, and where to be when a door opened so you did not invite hands. I learned the bars had weak spots that weren't where you thought. I learned that humiliation doesn't build scar, it builds spite, which is almost as useful. And, because the trace is both memory and compass, I learned the smell of rain inside a room with no windows. The archive has taller ceilings than it needs, the way churches do. Light falls from high panes and makes the dust look holy. Rows of shelving hold the pack's paper spine, tall binders in disciplined colors, boxes, labeled in Rowan's clean block letters, or a clerk's cursive that tries too hard. The room smells like paper wants to smell, dry and proud, and underneath it, faint, but there, pine and soap, and the bitter snap of the solvent they use for old glue. I signed into the ledger, because we are civilized animals, and took the cart to the section I wanted. 10 years. 4 binders per year. The math always looks heavier in your hands. The trace settled low and quiet as I worked. It never sleeps here, it prowls, touching the old places it knows. Somewhere above me, through floors and stone, the pack's heart thudded along, a communal drum I had once helped keep time for. I opened the first binder of the year I died. Reports, minutes, border updates. The night of the fire had gotten its own tab. I flipped to it and let my eyes take the shape of the words before my mind did, the way you put your palm in a stream before you drink, to test if it's too cold. Incident: unidentified hostiles infiltrated eastern sector. Response: defensive formation, evacuation of non-combatants. Casualties: provisional. The pen strokes were careful that night. Names written with ceremony, dates left open like wounds waiting for stitches. There is tenderness in bureaucracy, if you know where to look. It keeps people from vanishing twice. I turned the page. A form waited. Declaration of death in absentia. The space for body description was lined through. The witness section bore 3 signatures: Callan's neat lawyer script, Elder Maris, Garden Party Loops. And under them, the one I already knew would be there, Roen Hale. I didn't feel my face change. I refused. The trace, though, traitor that it is, honest that it is, lifted, sniffed, pushed. The air thickened in my nose with the penny metal smell of fresh blood. Mine. I'd bitten the inside of my cheek without noticing. It wasn't pain, it was proof. I leaned back on the stool and looked at the name again. The Alpha's hand was steady even on that line. Of course it was. He believes in hands like other men believe in gods. The signature didn't say I wanted this. It said I kept the world moving because that's the job. It said, I will answer for this. It said, if I tilted my head the way you do to hear a thing inside a thing, retreat. Memory slid over me like a film of water on skin. Roen at the pyre. His mouth making shapes the fire refused to listen to. The fraction of a look that had crossed between us when there was half a heartbeat left for looking. The way he hadn't come, yes, but also the way he had stayed with what needed staying with. The trace isn't romantic. It's practical and rude. It doesn't tell love stories, it tells roots. The root that night had not run through my cell, because it hadn't known there would be one. It had run through bodies to be saved, small lungs to keep breathing, borders to get to the other side of. Was that absolution? No. I'm not in the absolution business. The paper smelled of dust and ink and the oil from his skin where he'd braced the sheet to sign. I put my thumb on the margin and didn't touch the signature. You don't touch the thing you're not ready to name. I read the rest. The binder did not apologize and it did not lie. It laid out the months after, our dead counted, our missing listed, and then crossed to dead when the seasons changed, and hope became a luxury. The pack's strategies adapted, contracts renegotiated, patrols redrawn. A formal end to the old vanity projects we'd made of festivals. Roen had cut ornament until function showed, and then he'd cut function until survival did. Find anything you needed? The clerk at the desk asked when I rolled the cart back. Her voice had the careful professional flatness of someone whose job requires neutrality. Yes, I said. Do you need copies? No, I smiled with teeth, polite. Some things are heavier on paper. She nodded. She knew. The archive knows everything. In the hallway, the air cooled. My blood kept the smell of iron a few breaths longer than it should have, as if reluctant to give up the evidence. I leaned one shoulder to the stone and let the trace climb out of its corner and sit up. It didn't purr. It's not a gentle thing. It simply looked in the direction of the office 2 floors above, the one that smelled like pine and rain, and did nothing that could be mistaken for forgiveness. Retreat, I said aloud, to hear the shape the word made in my mouth now. It sounded less like leaving and more like choosing the road where most hearts survive. I wiped my mouth with the back of my hand and found the smallest smear of red. I tasted copper and winter. Then I squared my shoulders and went to see what else the past was hoarding. The council chamber wore its gray like a uniform. Stone ribs arched overhead. The light that made it through the high windows arrived, thinned and sullen, as if the sky itself disapproved of administrative hours. Even the round table looked chilled. The room had always been severe, but today it felt actively resistant, a house that had taught itself to live without me and resented having to remember. Wolves filled the seats in controlled arrangements, hierarchy disguised as neat spacing. The air smelled like wintered pine, ink, old wool, and the nerves people try to fold into their collars. Roen sat at the head with his hands composed, and his shoulders speaking a language of steadiness the room understood too well. My chair again, waited at his right, tolerant rather than welcoming. We are convened, Elder Callan said, as if calling the weather, as if weather obeyed. His voice carried the exact weight of a gavel that didn't need to be struck. Item 1. The formal reinstatement of Trace Harvey to the post of advisor. We recognize the charter. We recognize the claim. He paused, eyes sliding to the scar that slept beneath my cuff. Recognize complications. No one looked directly at my brand. Everyone smelled it. The lines under my skin hummed faintly. A hive turned thoughtful. Every time Rowan's gaze grazed my wrist, the lattice stirred, as if it had been wired to the way his attention lands. Complications, repeated Elder Maris in her parlor voice, which made a threat sound like an invitation. She lifted a packet and fanned pages she'd read too often. The brand of another house. One we do not name in this chamber without careful reason. We name our debts, Rowan said mildly. A brand is not a debt, Callan answered. It is a claim. The word hit the wood like a nail. I folded my hands on the table. Then we should be very particular about who is making claims on this body, I said, and whether we intend to honor them. Callan's mouth found a thinness it liked. Your presence presents a potential lever. If the brand holder chooses to pull, in which case, I said, pleasant as cut glass, you should be more afraid of the man attached to the brand than of the lines burned into him. A few throats made unbecoming sounds and converted them into coughs. My voice didn't rise. It never needs to when the words are honed. The room temperature tried to drop and found it had already bottomed out. We do not fear our own, Maris murmured, and the lie lay very still between us, hoping not to be stepped on. Rowan leaned back by a fraction. The alpha token at his throat caught weak light and set it to work. The legal question is settled, he said. The charter speaks. Mr. Harvey's seat stands. We pose not a legal question, Callan replied. We pose a strategic one. A branded advisor within arm's reach of an alpha is a liability. It should have rankled the animal part of me that he described me as if I weren't currently in the room. It did. It also amused the newer parts. Captivity trains you to see the shape of rhetoric. If you can reduce a man to a problem, you can move him like an object on a board. Rowan's jaw clocked once. He kept his voice at council temperature. He is also an asset. He knows our laws to the letter. He knows our enemy's appetite. He knows, firsthand, what a cage looks like from the inside and how to walk out of it. The brand, Maris tried, is not contagious, I said dryly. I would have warned you if treason spread by proximity. My smile showed the exact number of teeth required by this room. If you're concerned about influence, test for it. Put me in the circle and see if I spin when you push. Callan steepled his fingers. He liked the performative holiness of it. You invite provocation? I invite evidence. A small current moved along the table. Some wolves dislike the first. Most wolves respect the second. Rowan inclined his head, an acknowledgement that cost him nothing and bought me half an inch of space. We will institute standard safeguards, he said. Not because we distrust Mr. Harvey particularly, but because we trust no one that much. Not even ourselves. His eyes touched mine then, stone and rain, a quiet verdict. The brand answered with a low, treacherous warmth, like coals remembering fire. Callan's attention cut there and back. He smelled a private language and didn't like that he couldn't translate it. Very well, he said at last. A motion, reinstatement to full advisory privileges, with routine, audits and periodic scent checks in the presence of neutral elders. The House will refrain from speaking the name of the brand holder, unless required by treaty. Any contact initiated by said House will be reported and addressed here. Seconded, Maris said, already calculating the favors this would buy. The vote passed, quicker than it deserved. Packs prefer decisions once they start. Stalling looks like fear. Fear draws things that love to be drawn. Item 2, Callan began. Later, Rowan said, voice on the low shelf that makes wolves rearrange themselves without thinking. Half-day recess. We reconvene at 4. He stood. The room followed. When bodies spilled into the hallway, the building's chill held its ground. Stone eats warmth, and it was hungry. Rowan fell into step beside me without ceremony, his shoulder a respectful distance from mine, like a door you could push if you wanted. Congratulations, he said. It did not sound like congratulations. It sounded like welcome back to the work. Condolences, I said. You just hired trouble. We walked a span in equal silence. Old habit, good as prayer. The corridor's windows offered narrow blued views of the training yard below, wolves moving through drills. Breath pluming, the geometry of combat taught to bodies that would one day misunderstand it on purpose. I missed our tea, I said finally. You know, the one steeped in arsenic and intentions. His mouth tipped, a scrape of humor across granite. We serve it cold now, Roen said. Less aroma, more bite. Trendy, I said. The brand pulsed, approving the joke more than it had any right to. You always were a man of innovations, only the survivable kind. We reached the stair that cut down toward the yard. He paused with me at the landing, looking through glass at the bodies below. The wolves had learned to move like blades in a drawer, close, careful, aware of neighbors. No wasted flourish, no pretty. It made something in me both mournful and proud. You made them tighter, I said. You turned the pack into a muscle. I took the fat off, he said. It kept catching fire. A pair of young betas sparred in the ring's center. The smaller one had good footwork and a bad habit of looking where he wished he was going instead of where he was. The bigger one telegraphed with his shoulders. Rowan's gaze tracked both, cataloging, a general's quiet hunger. You're stronger, I said before I could decide not to. Not just meaner, that's your compliment? He asked. It's the one you'll believe. We descended. The air in the yard shot colder, honest weather after corridor, chill. The ground was packed earth rhymed to crisp. Scent lived differently out here. Less filtered, more true. I felt the brand lift like a dog scenting the front gate. Wolves glanced our way and pretended they hadn't. Pretending is training too. Roen stepped into the ring without announcing himself and the bodies on. The edges straightened like you do when gravity remembers your name. He didn't bark orders. He adjusted spines with a hand, corrected stances with a look, asked a lanky adolescent what he thought he was doing with that elbow, and then taught him how not to die with it. He moved through them like a tide moves through pilings, unignorable, shaping without needing to shove. I watched the line of his back when he demonstrated a throw. He was economy now. The youth he'd worn when we planned futures on porches had been smelted off. In its place, steel that had learned when to warm. Respect arrived like heat returning to a numb hand, prickly and unwelcome, and then fine. I let it in. It didn't absolve him. It didn't clean the ink on that declaration of death. It simply recognized the man he had made while I had been remade elsewhere. The dangerous part was what followed it. Not longing. Longing is theater. This was the quiet pull of a compass finding north when you carry iron in your pocket and pretend you don't. When he glanced up mid-instruction, and his eyes met mine through the winter light, the world went for a moment too loud and too clear. The trace woke like a tuning fork, a silver tone running teeth to spine. I didn't look away first, neither did he. It felt like standing in a doorway that isn't there and still stepping through. He broke the look on purpose, turning a student's wrist with careful pressure, showing how to use another man's bones to talk him out of his bad choices. My breath remembered an old rhythm and arranged itself around it before I told it to. Advisor, someone said at my elbow. Callan. He'd come down, hands folded, mouth sanctified. You appear settled. Should we schedule your audits with the scent masters now, or will that also be evidence later? Schedule them, I said. I didn't spare him my eyes. I kept them on Roen. I like calendars. They make men honest. Callan made a sound meant to be appreciative and ended up a sneer. You enjoy being provocative. I enjoy being alive. He drifted off, leaving a film of dislike easy to wash. Roen dismissed the ring, sending bodies to water and cool down. They dispersed with the relief of students released 10 minutes early, laughter returning like blood to cheeks. He came to the ropes. Didn't ask me in, didn't ask me out. Held them a hand's width open, the kind of invitation a wolf doesn't phrase. I stepped through. Up close, his scent cut through the yard's honest weather. Pine wet enough to bead. On bark, iron filed fine, that rain choice he carries like a second mouth. The trace vibrated, at a pitch I could almost hear. It wasn't dominance, and it wasn't submission. Old law calls it recognition. New law would try to name it as evidence. I let it be what it was, a thing older than either law. The house, he said, meaning the pack, meaning the stone around us, meaning the years between. It forgot you. I noticed, I said. It's very proud of its memory. It can be taught. So can men. We stood there, stupidly close, with the rope biting my hip and the cold insisting it existed. His eyes had more light in them outside, or maybe they borrowed it from the snow starting to find the air. I'm not asking you for forgiveness, he said. That's convenient, I said. Since I'm not in stock, what are you in stock of? Advice, teeth, patience? A pause. Enough respect to be dangerous. Something in him loosened that the others wouldn't have seen. Then give me some, he said. Advice, not respect. Stop cutting until you can't feel, I said. Start teaching them why they bleed. It makes better wolves. He nodded once. The trace hummed in approval. Ridiculous thing that it is. On the far side of the yard, a young beta barked a laugh and chased. Another with a snow handful, discipline dissolving into ordinary joy. The sound went through me like a thaw. We'd taken a step towards something that wasn't then and wasn't yet. The building still didn't like me. The old table still remembered my absence. The brand still hated and loved the air here with equal zeal. But when Roen looked at me again, steady and rain-bright, the thin line between us vibrated and held. Trust doesn't come back all at once. Sometimes it returns in pieces, like someone scattering your name on the ground, and you picking it up letter by letter until it spells the truth you can live with. The archive after hours breathes differently. In daylight, it has the prim kindness of a librarian. At night, it's a cathedral that forgot its god and kept the incense. Dust floats in columns of weak moon and lamp glow, turning the air grainy enough to chew. The smell is old paper and starch, and the bitter ghost of glue boiled in someone's grandmother's pot. The building hums in its bones, heated pipes ticking like patient insects. I had a key I wasn't supposed to have, one from the little ring the clerk pretended not to wear. I had a cart with a wheel that squeaked only on turns, and I had the trace laid quiet and flat in me, like a drawn bowstring, not calm, prepared. The door to the back room, the one they call special holdings in the polite ledgers in the cupboard, where the ugly lives in the mouths of wolves who've worked here too long, gave after the second turn. Keys are less about metal than about the rhythm of your hand. The room is narrower than it looks from outside. Someone had paneled it in darker wood than the rest of the archive, as if shame likes mahogany. A desk sat under a green-shaded lamp, its pool of light a small island in a sea of dark. Boxes lived along the walls with the sullen presence of things that know they matter. I set the lamp lower and started on the boxes labeled with the year the forest ate our pack. Even here, the file folders were neat. Wolves do morality badly, but we do paperwork like we invented it. I flipped past minutes too carefully worded to trust, past the cleaned bones of agendas until the first letter surfaced. A real one, not a memo. Handwriting that didn't know it was beautiful. Elder Maris. The demonstration must be dramatic, she had written, or the young will not believe in fear. She had underlined dramatic, with a flourish that made bile ride my tongue. Another letter, months earlier. Callan, less elegant, more certain stability requires spectacle. If we allow the old guard their ceremonies, we will never be allowed to change anything that makes us vulnerable. A clean break. Clean break. There are phrases that deserve teeth. A third paper, not a letter. A list of names with marks beside them. Categories: reliable, persuadable, unmanageable. My name had a note. Central figure. Removal will consolidate transition. As if I were a doorknob they planned to replace to make the house feel new. Under that, a packet folded into itself so tightly the paper remembered and fought me. I eased it open. A transcript. Meeting of 3 elders, 1 witness unnamed, and, my lungs forgot how, Roen Hale. The handwriting switched between them. Notes and comments and the pretense of impartiality that institutional crimes wear like a tie. We can't hold this border and the festival, Roen had said. The letters were not his. Some clerk had taken them down, but the rhythm was. Pick one. Symbol matters. Maris countered. The symbol is survival, he answered. Halfway down the page, the words went colder. The risk is unacceptable, Callan wrote. If we stage the incursion, we demonstrate the necessity of the new order. Casualties may be. The line trailed off. A blot marked the rest. Below it, a sharper hand. No civilian casualties. Roen, I knew the discipline of those letters without having to be told. If you want theater, do it with actors who signed up. And if we need a martyr, Maris had written, a little too quickly, the ink slightly lighter where the nib had been eager. We don't, Roen wrote. But the next page, another hand, the clerk again, summarized decisions that spoke with smaller mouths. Demonstration to proceed under controlled conditions. Non-essential personnel to be reassigned. Communication protocols tightened. In the event of unknown variables, retreat to Plan B. Plan B wore a separate folder's skin. I stared at the tab until the lamplight felt too hot on the back of my neck. Then, I opened it. Plan B was me, not named, not brave enough for that. Describe the way you describe a knife you don't want to admit you're keeping up your sleeve. If Advisor X is compromised, it read, public recognition of loss will facilitate consolidation. Formalize death in absentia to permit swift transfer of duties. Coordinate with border cells to remove any ambiguity regarding survival. If alive, neutralize with extraction to unknown custody until stabilization achieved. If alive, turn him into a rumor. If alive, let him die somewhere paper can't smell him. My mouth had gone dry. The trace had not. It rose slowly, like heat through a wet shirt, touching each rib with careful fingers. It did not snarl. It did not command. It knew, already, what choice had been made about me, and what choice had been made about the pack. The older part of me, the one trained on porches and in conference rooms and on borderlines, read the same truth. The elders had planned a theater of panic and called it prudence. Roen had offered to cut the budget and call it salvation. Somewhere between those, they had found a compromise ugly enough to pass. A page clipped to the back of the folder wore a thin ribbon of red wax. A formal note of the sort you seal, so you can say later your hands were clean. The signature at the bottom settled the question my stomach had already answered. Roen Hale. In the absence of body, for the sake of order and survival, I sign. The trace flashed. Not pain, it had better manners than that. Heat ran along the brand like a song you half remembered and hadn't wanted to. My vision filled up with river light for a second, and behind the light, another room, another night. The pyre, Roan's mouth shaping. Retreat, the look that wasn't rescue and wasn't goodbye and hurt like both. I put both palms on the desk and leaned over the papers, the way you lean over a sink to stop yourself from breaking. I didn't cry. I had done my crying in places that took it as payment. What left my body was quieter and more expensive. A breath that sounded like the end of a name. Truth doesn't burn. It sits. It refuses to look away. Find anything worth the lamp oil? Said a voice from the doorway. I didn't start. I had smelled him before he spoke. Rain deciding, iron fine enough to floss a wound. He closed the door behind him with his thigh and came into the ring of light like a man stepping into a ring he had built. He didn't glance at the boxes. He looked at my hands where they pressed the paper, then at my face. The trace surged once and leveled. He was still a long way away. He was too close. Did you time this for the dramatic line? I asked, throat dry. I followed your scent, he said. It was dramatic enough. I slid the top document toward him with a fingertip. Your handwriting is very tidy when you sign away a man's life. He looked down. He didn't take the paper up. He read without hands, then, because he isn't a coward, put his palm beside mine on the desk and leaned in. Overlap without contact. The brand flooded heat along my collarbone, a bright, stubborn pulse. He ignored it, which is a kind of noticing. They wanted a martyr, he said. They got one, I said. He didn't die. No, he said. He didn't. The room noise, the tick of the pipes, the whisper of settling wood, fell under the weight of what wasn't said. He was good at quiet. He could build a whole conversation out of it and then hang you from the rafters with the grammar. You could have looked, I said, because some knives are designed for revisiting. I did, he said, eyes on the page. Just not hard enough to find you without losing 10 others. Say it plain. He lifted his eyes. They were winter water and iron filings and the last minute before rain. We staged the attack, he said, not the enemies. We invited them in to show the pack what it was refusing to see, and then the enemies accepted the invitation too well. I signed the death because the pack needed to believe you were gone, or we would split in two trying to keep you and lose everything. I told myself you were dead because if you weren't, I would have... He stopped. His jaw worked, then let go. I would have burned it all to get you back. Say it, I said softly, angrier than when I shouted. I failed you, he said. I picked the many over the one, and the one was you. The trace struck like a tuning fork in my bones. Heat crawled its lattice. A pulse answered pulse. The brand wanted... what? It wanted the language wolves don't have for this, a word that is not surrender and not victory. Recognition wasn't big enough. It needed something with ache in it. You burned my world, I said, my voice clean. To save yours. He didn't look away. I burned mine, he said, so you could live. It shouldn't have mattered how he said it. It did. He didn't offer it like absolution. He offered it like an invoice, complete, itemized, due upon receipt. The years of anger in me didn't break. They refiled. I had hated him with the conviction of a pilgrim. Hate had kept my feet moving when food and sleep and pride did not. Standing there, with bureaucratic treason under my hands and winter behind his eyes, I realized the object of my hate had not been a man. It had been a choice. And the choice had been made in a room that smelled like this one, paper and dust and iron and requirement. The heat from the brand rose until it fogged the glass of the desk lamp and put sweat in the hinge of my elbow. The trace threaded the air between us like a wire you could pluck and hear sing. I did not step closer. Neither did he. The distance vibrated. I don't forgive you, I said. I didn't ask, he said. Silence expanded. It didn't feel like a cliff anymore. It felt like a field after fire, black, ugly, but warm, alive under the surface if you trusted it. I lived 10 years hating the man who saved me, I said, almost to the papers. I lived 10 years saving a pack and calling it an excuse, he said, almost to the lamp. We looked at each other then, fully. No porch between, no pyre, no council, no ring. His scent pulled close. The trace rose like a standing ovation, shameless, ancient. A low, undeniable warmth ran outward from the brand to my throat, to the inside of my wrists, to the old bite scar, under my ribs. My breath hitched. His did too. The room heard both, and pretended to be deaf. Do you want me to say I'm sorry? He asked. I want you to stop being right, I said. I hate when you're right. That is my worst habit, he said. And the smallest smile he owned flickered and died like a candle reprimanded by wind. The humor held for a heartbeat, the human-sized kind that keeps wolves from going for each other's throats when the blood is up. It made space. It didn't clean anything. It let us breathe around the burn. I gestured to the papers. This doesn't make you good, I said. No, he said. It makes me responsible. And me? I asked. Because some nights you test the wound with a thumb to make sure it knows you're still there. What does it make me? His gaze went lower, to the brand, then back to my face. Alive, he said, and more dangerous than when you left. The lamp buzzed. A pipe ticked. The room's cold tried to creep back in and found us radiant enough to hold it off for another minute. I gathered the pages, put them in a new order, the way you do when a story changes shape in your hands. I took copies with the clerk's little machine that pretends it's just for land deeds and recipes. I sealed the originals with the red wax the room kept for ritual and shame. Roen didn't help. He stood with his hands behind his back and his breath doing its own math. When it was done, I slid one copy across the desk toward him. You keep a set, I said. You'll need to read this again when you decide what to say to them. To the council, he said. To the young, I said. They should learn what happens when wolves mistake theater for law. He nodded. You'll stand with me. I'll stand, I said. With you, if you're where the line should be. We turned off the lamp together. The dark came up fast and soft. The smell of old paper swelled to fill the room, clean in its way. Truth has that arrogance. It takes up the space you give it, and some you don't. We stepped into the corridor, where the night had teeth. The building ticked. The trace settled at last into a steady hum, a pulse that belonged to us and to itself. He fell in beside me without touching, our shoulders a respectful width apart, a door you could push if you wanted. At the bend in the hall, he said, "You're shaking." "I'm not," I said, and then felt it in my hands, a fine tremor, more relief than rage. He didn't reach. He isn't that man. Not here, not yet. Tomorrow, he said. It sounded like an oath that had learned to fear its own voice. Tomorrow, I said back, and the building, which had forgotten me so efficiently, listened. Morning came in gray plates, one laid carefully atop another, as if the sky were practicing restraint. The council chamber met it with its own discipline, stone ribs, cold light. The round table already ringed with bodies arranged by rule and habit. My chair waited at Roan's right. I took it like a man taking back a name. On the table between us lay the copies from the archive. Wax seals broken, edges squared, truth sorted into the order it deserved. The room smelled like wintered pine, ink, wool, and the faint metallic expectancy of a place about to change its mind and hoping no one would notice. Elder Callan cleared his throat with ceremonial precision. "We reconvene," he said, as if time answered to his voice. Item 1. Petitions regarding border maintenance. Item 1, Roen said, lower, cutting neatly, is the matter of the staged incursion and its consequences. The silence that followed had weight. You could stack it and shore a wall. Callan blinked, slow and owlish. Elder Maris smiled the way you smile at a dog that may yet bite your hand. "Alpha," she chided mildly. We agreed to adjourn until 4, Roen said. We did not agree to forget. He tipped the top packet toward the center of the table with 2 fingers. The red wax caught the gray light. "Read." Maris's smile soured. Callan lifted the first page, as if he expected it to burn. He and Maris skimmed with the kind of speed that signals pre-knowledge. Around the table, young wolves tried not to crane, failed, and pretended they hadn't. "This is privileged material," Maris said. "Special holdings." "Is not a priest," I said. "It keeps records. We're the ones who pretend they're sacraments." Callan's mouth found a narrowness it loved. "You have violated your theater," I said. "We brought the house lights up. The audience deserves to see the stagehands." Roen didn't look at me. He didn't need to. He set his palm on the papers beside mine, a parallel that read, as accident, to anyone who didn't speak this dialect. The trace inside me rose, warmth along the brand, a steady thrum that wasn't dominance and wasn't surrender. Recognition, yes, but calmer now. Less wire, more thread. "We will read into the record," Roen said, "and then we will decide." I read the letters, because my voice carries clean. Maris's elegant underlines, Callan's blunt arithmetic dressed as policy. The summary that swapped the word spectacle for demonstration and expected no one to notice. The page that sketched Plan B without naming me and still found a way to write martyr without choking. When I reached the sealed note with Rowan's signature, I paused. He didn't. "Read it," he said. So I did. When I came to in the absence of body, for the sake of order and survival I sign, the room breathed in. A few wolves swore softly behind their teeth. One of the younger betas made a small sound humans call a gasp, and wolves call a warning. Maris recovered first. "We were under pressure," she said, each syllable sanded and polished. "Leaders make decisions in imperfect weather. We chose the path that preserved the most lives. You chose theater in a forest full of matches," I said. "And if you had died," Callan added smoothly, "you would have been a sacrifice that sealed our survival." "You don't get to write epitaphs for the living," I said. "Not without consent." Rowan's voice didn't rise. "It never has to." You used fear to manufacture compliance, he said. You invited wolves to attack us to prove we needed you. Then you needed a story the pack could bear, and you chose a neat one. Maris's nostrils flared, a whiff of garden preserved in vinegar. We chose structure over chaos. You chose power over law, Roen said. And when the law objected, you renamed it. He slid the second packet toward Callan. Here's what happens next, he said. Callan opened his mouth, closed it. The room leaned toward Roen without moving. No purges, Roen said. No bloodletting. We don't right a staged wrong with real wrong. He glanced at me then, brief, exact. The trace warmed and settled, as if approving a well-laid blade. Sanctions. Removal from council positions for 2 cycles. Public acknowledgement of the actions taken and the harm done. Restitution directed to the families of those who died in the chaos you invited. And he tapped the last page with one finger. We changed the law. I felt it then, in the bones of the room. The buildings we build learn the rhythms of us. The council chamber had known the hammer of old rules for too long. It braced for another and found Roen holding a different tool. We will no longer divide by brands, he said. Marks do not determine allegiance or rights. We will stop letting other houses stamp themselves into our law by proxy. We will institute audits to guard influence, without turning wolves into ledgers. The charter will state it plain. A wolf is ours by oath and conduct, not by what was burned into him under someone else's hand. Maris's smile tried to reassemble itself and failed. You strip us of our most effective caution. We keep the caution, I said. We remove the superstition. Callan set the papers down as if they were heavier than law. And if the houses come to collect what they think they own, then we answer as a house that knows itself, Roen said. Together, a murmur like a low surf rolled the table. The young straightened, the old stiffened. Someone made a sound that was almost a laugh, and almost a sob. Maris glanced at the faces, calculating the tide and finding it already out. You mean to make a precedent, she said. Yes, Roen said. We mean to make a law. He looked around the table. We mean to make this pack worth surviving. There are moments when packs transform, and then spend 5 years pretending it happened gradually. This was one. I felt the trace hum along my brand, and then drop to a steady, reasonable pulse. Fire banked in a grate, not leaping. Choice, not compulsion. The room settled its hackles, as if someone had finally explained that the thunder was only weather. Callan tried one last feint. And what of the wolves who arranged all of this out of a misguided love for order? He asked, with the wounded ache of a man rehearsing martyrdom. Roen met his eyes and let him see nothing to climb. You'll step down, he said. You'll do the work. You'll carry the boxes and open the archives to any wolf who wants to learn what we did in their name. You'll serve meals in the dining hall. You'll teach the young what you thought was necessary and why you were wrong. He held, then added, You'll be looked in the eye while you do it. Maris's breath left her like a sash loosening. That was the cruelty and the mercy both, to make them remain. Vote, Roen said. The hands went up, some quick, some slow, some with a tremble that had nothing to do with cold. Opposed, 2. Abstained, 1. The rest, yes. The gavel nobody needed didn't fall. The room's quiet did it for us. Next, Roen said. But the room knew there was no next. Not today. We stood. Bodies made their arrangements. Hierarchy reshuffling. Roles trying on new names. Callan and Maris didn't look at me on their way out. They looked at the floor the way people do when they realize it's holding them up whether they deserve it or not. In the hallway, young Beta with freckles, the swallow click boy, caught my sleeve and then remembered himself and let go. Sir, he said, and then bravely, Trace. Yes? Thank you, he blurted. His eyes were too bright. For not letting them make it a story about fear. It's still a story about fear, I said gently. We're just choosing who narrates. He nodded, puzzled and proud, and went to run drills with a step that lifted more than it should have. The building's cold felt less certain of itself. Roen and I didn't walk together, not at first. He dealt with inquiries, the press of bodies who wanted orders to make the day make sense. I answered 3 questions, redirected 2 more, and ignored one I didn't owe. When the hall emptied to a usable quiet, we ended up at the same window landing we'd stood on yesterday, the training yard below a geometry of effort and breath. You could have cut deeper, I said. I don't want them bleeding out, he said. That's new, I said. It's older than you think. We stood with our shoulders a respectful width apart. The door you could push if you wanted. The trace laid itself down like a dog deciding to stay. For the first time since I'd set foot back in this house, I felt the possibility of bone-deep quiet. Not peace. Peace is a big word, expensive and rare, but quiet, earned. Come home, he said, as if asking me to cross a room. He didn't look at me when he said it. He watched the yard. A man who knows his responsibilities won't look away just because his wants asked him to. Say where that is, I said. He breathed out. Where you can put your back to a wall without wondering if someone counted the bricks wrong. That's not an address, I said. It is, he said. It's just not on a map. His house kept the austerity of the man who ran it. Clean lines, warm wood, a few old things left on purpose. Objects that remembered hands, not just roles. The rain started in earnest while we were walking. It came with that particular sigh this place had trained me to love and hate. The sound sat on the roof like a cat. We shed our coats in the foyer, a little room with a bench that had learned the shape of wet wolves and patience. He hung my coat next to his, like a decision that had already been made. The trace didn't purr. It set a rhythm, calm as pulse. In the kitchen, he said, and it was a statement that contained the closest thing to an apology I'd ever need from him. Rowan's kitchen was not a place for guests. It was a place you feed people you find. The counter wore a lineup of mugs that didn't match on principle. I reached for the kettle, like my hands knew the way. Still poison? He asked, leaning against the doorway, making it look like a deliberate piece of architecture. Always, I said. I just cut it with honey now. He huffed that nearly smile, the one that shows up when he doesn't try to find it. I set water to heat, found the tin where he keeps the good leaves, let the scent rise. Bitter, green, clean. I poured, added a spoon of honey like domesticated sin, and slid a mug to him. I still prefer poison, I said, but now with honey. Just don't mix up the cups, he said, and the lightest humor sat down at the table with us, like it had been there before the worst of it, and was glad to be invited back. We stood at the counter and drank like men who had carried their day in their teeth, and finally put it down. Steam lifted. The window over the sink framed morning deciding to be a real day after all. The rain brightening the leaves, the sky changing its mind. The house listened, the way houses do. I don't forgive you, I said again, not like a weapon anymore, like a weather report. He nodded, not wounded. I don't forgive me, he said. That might be a problem we can share. Careful, I said. That sounds like intimacy. Sounds like maintenance, he said. We did the small work, the washing of mugs, the wiping of a ring of honey that tried to glue itself to the counter, the finding of the dish towel that lives in the wrong drawer because I refused to let some things be sensible. Our shoulders bumped once. Neither of us apologized. The trace checked in, and then laid back down. When we moved to the window, mugs refilled, the day had shifted, rain to a fine veiling, light coming. Through in sheets, the kind of morning that makes you think winter could be taught gentler manners. We stood with that view, and let the silence do a new job. You'll speak to them, I said. All of them. Yes. You'll tell them you signed. Yes. You'll tell them why, and you'll tell them to change the law, because law is the story we agree to live inside together. Yes. And when the houses come with their claims, we'll answer as a house, he said. By oath and conduct. We didn't make vows. We didn't touch more than the air required. The bond between us, the old silver thread that had once felt like wire and then like a whip, glowed low under the skin, a hearth kept for warmth and not for warning, fire and steel, one to temper the other, not to destroy. In the glass, our reflections stood close without blurring, 2 silhouettes, bracketed by a window, morning settling itself carefully around their edges. The picture made itself. A room, 2 men, steam rising from cups, a world that had survived itself enough to try again. "Trace," he said, not a question. "Roen," I answered, not a promise. The camera in my mind pulled back, hallway, door, eaves, the line of roof with rain ticking its steady measure. The house held us on purpose. The pack breathed like something worth keeping. The light found us without asking too many questions. We stayed at the window until the tea went from hot to warm, from weapon to comfort. Outside, the rain decided to end, and then, generously, did not. Inside, the trace dimmed to a companionable glow, present, chosen, quiet, not command, not surrender. A choice we made and would keep making, morning by morning, cup by cup, while the day rose and did its work.